So, he might be leaving Arsenal, but he's got no intention whatsoever of leaving football. Ray, he's a man you know well. Does that not surprise you in the least?
No, not at all. I mean, when I played under Arsene Wenger, he was on that training field every single day. You know, even if the first team was doing a warm-down, he'd be out there with the other lads. He just loves football. You know, he'd watch games after games after games, and I think it's his life in general. You know, he's sort of guy that he used to watch football every second of the day, and he'd be so prepared for games coming up that I just can't see him outside of football. And I didn't see him going upstairs either. People say, well, he can go upstairs and be part of the board. No, that won't be what he wants to do, because he's still got so much to offer in the game, and I'm sure that he'll have a little rest. He'll go and watch the World Cup. He'll be a commentator during the World Cup, and then he'll look at his options. So
a week off, in other words?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure there'll be lots of offers out there that will be taking. Seriously,
he underlined what you just said, his obsession with football, Craig. He said, well, I might have a little rest. That might be a week or so. That's how obsessed with football the guy is.
Well, and that's probably why he's been so successful. He's been an incredible manager for our game. You know, since coming into the Premier League, he's improved the Premier League. He's improved our football hugely in this country. So, do I see him looking? No, I wouldn't say looking, but I think it's good for football that he isn't retiring, because he has so much to offer. It's just his course has run out at Arsenal. Unfortunately for both sides, probably he might not want to. It's like an ex-player, for instance. I say an ex-player, when you've been doing really well at a football club, but the last year, 2 years, it hasn't been going too well. You know they're looking on bringing someone in. The manager calls you in and says, look, I'm going to go this way. I'm looking to bring another player in. But I still think I've got 1 or 2 years left that I could still play. But at the time, the manager has...
You can't see it yourself, though, can you?
No, you can't. The manager has to make that decision. I think the board have done the right thing here. They had to make that decision for him. But, like I said, I'd still like to... He still has so much to offer football. And I'm glad he still wants to stay involved in the game, because, like I said, I wanted to take that French job. And look, I'm not saying this is going to be available. It all depends on Deschamps does. But with the young players coming through there, I think it'd be the perfect fit for him.
I think the age as well, he'd be looking at, you know, if he's a lot younger, you might want that day-to-day job still on the training field. But the national job, you know, he'd be watching lots of football, which he loves doing.
What, do you think that'd be enough for him, though, Ray?
Well, that's the big question for him, whether he can ever be a national manager. I always said, you know, going back years, I can't see him being a national manager, because he loves the day-to-day routines and coming in to train with the lads, and sometimes joined in, weren't the best of players, but he joined in with the players as well. And he loved being around the players every single day, you know, and seeing him improve under him. Because a lot of players improve so much under him, but you wouldn't have that on the national side. It'd be very difficult, because the players come to the national side, you've got it, there it is, you've got to go out and play now, and it's simple. So I think he would rather be a club manager.
Do you think, though, I mean, he alluded to the fact he would take a job with a Champions League club or a club in the Champions League. Do you think those clubs will still be interested in him, given that he did fantastic at Arsenal, it was almost in 2 parts. Brilliant the first part, last 10 years, not as good.
I think his stock is still very high.
Is it really?
Europe. Yeah, I think so. I would say that loads of people might say he needs a change himself as well. I know that he's been at Arsenal for a long time, 22 years. No one envisaged him to be there that long. You know, when he first turned up, if you said to me he'd be there 22 years later, I would have said you're mad. So he's been there. I know he's had some bad times over the years as well, especially recent years. I know he won 3 FA Cups, and it's still a good return, but it was the Champions League and the league itself that he's really lost his way a little bit. So, but I think that a lot of clubs will be out there, and I'm sure PSG, look like they might have a manager already, might be interested. You know, he turned down Real Madrid years ago. Whether he's going to get a job like that, I doubt it.
Well, that's my question. Will he still be coveted by the top clubs in Europe?
I believe so, yeah. I believe... look, your Real Madrids are different. You know, those 1 or 2 clubs, I'm not sure he'd have that opportunity to go there now. But just underneath that, just underneath those teams who are looking to get Champions League or in and around the Champions League, and all the teams in Europe, I'm sure I'm sure they'd be very interested in talking to him, because, like I said, he has so much to offer the game, and I actually believe it could be a good change for him. It could be exactly what he needs.
Could reinvigorate him.
It could do, because like I said, when he first came to Arsenal, the impact he had, of course, because even over the last 2 years, you tried to break everything down what he'd done, and the impact he even had on other players, like myself, being at Norwich as a young kid coming through. I remember at the time we had a youth team coach who was, he was a youth team coach at Arsenal, but he was the under-21 manager at Wales. Tom Wally, I don't know if
of course, Tom Wally,
but then he was telling us about obviously Arsene Wenger coming in and
the revolution.
Yeah, but with the diets and what you needed to do to become a footballer, and it actually had a huge impact on me. So I was very careful about what I ate. Even the amount of water you drink in a day, making sure you're hydrated. It was a lot of those stuff like warm downs.
It was shoot to win, believe it or not.
It really became part of my game. So it had a huge impact on me knowing what was going on elsewhere. But like I said...
But that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I know it was a long time ago.
Has the game caught up with him? Has he still got that innovation?
He was in a place then where the French national team or French players coming through at that time were so good, and he knew who was coming through. He was at the top of all these, your Henrys, your Vieiras, all these type of players coming through, even your Naukas and all that, where you were able to get them. So if you had a manager like Arsene Wenger at that time who already had the match, already knew, even don't forget your boys in Africa as well, with the French boys who run a lot of like the academies in the Ivory Coast, he had a head start. He had a head start in all those. But
I agree.
What I'm trying to say is now no one's got a head start.
No, I think the transfer market.
Everyone else knows there's a
because communication.
You watch I watched Barcelona 2 days ago yesterday 2 days ago. My fault. In the European Cup final, they had a boy from Venezuela playing up front, who they brought over since he was 10. Don't forget, Messi come over at 11 years of age. These top clubs now know every top young talent in the world.
That's why he had a
they didn't
an
have
start
that much.
with everybody.
Yeah.
Some of the signings he made, you never heard of these guys, and suddenly he's got them coming into the club. Going back to his transfers, but as Craig says, there's a scouting network now, so much better than every single club.
Well, look, Anelka for 500,000 from PSG.
They sold him for 23.5 million next year, and they bought Henry and a new training ground. So some of the deals he's made.
Oh no!
I wish I invested my money in it with Arsene Wenger.
Don't we all?
OK, so look, we know who's going, but who's coming to Arsenal? It was interesting today because Arsene Wenger said, "Look, I'm not involved in whoever the next candidate is going to be. I'm not involved in the selection process. However, Luis Enrique is a very, very good coach." He basically said. But then, interestingly, he said, I think it would be good if the next manager was a former Arsenal player.
Well, it cuts it down a little bit then, doesn't it? I mean, I know Patrick Vieira has been mentioned and Arteta now has come in, second favourite now to get the job, so he's well thought of. But, it's going to be interesting. It's a massive decision Arsenal are going to make here because, they haven't had this problem for many years to pick a manager. And we've seen what happened at other clubs, Manchester United, Chelsea. If you don't get the right man, it's going to be a struggle. Whether they go with experience and say, look, we need someone who's going to come in now, maybe a bit more defensive-minded, a little bit more organised at times, because at times Arsenal are too all over the place. I mean, we've seen that in Europe this year. I know they're into the semi-final now, but there's times in away games that, you need that little
More
bit
discipline.
A little bit more structure of the way you play.
I mean, Ivan Gazidis said we're going to hunt right across the world, but Arsenal, they intend to be bold with their decision. I mean, would you say that is possibly paving the way for Mikel Arteta, who's never taken charge of a senior team?
Can you take a gamble like that, Craig?
Would you be amazed if they did? If I was in their shoes, I wouldn't be convinced with that. Look, I'm sure he'd become a very good manager, but I'd like to see him for a club like Arsenal. It's like that. It's like that old saying. Well, I say it's an old saying. I'm not sure if it is, but I'm going to say it anyway. If my young boy just passed his driving test at 17, he's not having a Lamborghini for his first car. And I believe at a club like Arsenal, while it's done, you need someone who's had some experience in managing. Whether I don't care what level, I'm not too. And I'll be interested in just that experience, his day-to-day running. Even though he might have been a coach, but to come to an Arsenal football club and have the confidence in, OK, now we'll give you the big league, now we'll give you all these top players. We trust you, we know what you can do because we've seen it even at lesser club with lesser players, like Patrick would have had over in New York. He wouldn't have had the same quality, but he's been learning his trade. And also, a little bit of travelling. There's so much to go into and to be said for it. And I don't mean to say, oh, well, he hasn't achieved anything. That doesn't mean too much.
No.
What it is he's been able to take a team on a daily basis. He's learned his trade with his experience playing. That for me would give him a head start over Arteta.
I think he'd get a chance as well. The fans would give him a chance.
Yeah.
Do you think the fans... I mean, Vieira was 12-1. He was outside of that little group. But do you think it would have been an easier sell to the Arsenal fans, Vieira, as opposed to Arteta?
I think so, definitely. I think skipper of the club. Biggest compliment I can play Patrick. I played in lots of dressing rooms and lots of big games with Patrick, and he was always there. He was one of them sort of guys that demanded so much out of each other as a central midfielder. And Tony Adams was always a great skipper. And we always thought that when he retired, who's going to take over the armband? And Patrick stepped up. And he wasn't too far behind Tony, so that's a huge compliment for him. He knows the club, he knows he come as a young lad, 17, 18 years old. He grew into the stature of the club as well, the history of the club, and, you know, he's very successful.
Isn't that a bit romantic?
The club is romantic. The club hasn't recovered since he's gone.
Patrick
Vieira. Patrick Vieira. Arsenal's problems of winning the league, of becoming the force they were, went when he went. They've never been able to replace him. Never been able to. Before, we used to play against these guys. You would try intensity and say, OK, let's get about him. Let's get physical with them, even though it was very difficult because in the tunnel, they were all twice the size of you. But you would try and intimidate them, try and get on top of them, and they would bully you. They would physically say, if you wanted the physical battle, and Patrick was the biggest one for that. You couldn't get it. You couldn't get anywhere near it. If you wanted to get it a defender, he'd be the first one.
But does that make those qualities make him the right man to be the Arsenal manager now?
He's a born leader. Very few of us are. Some of us can be made, or some of us can take responsibility and be pushed on and embrace the responsibility. But he was born a leader, and also because I was on the pro license with him, my professional, you know, to. The pro license where you become, obviously, that's the final bit. And so I took it with him we were on a two-year course. And I played with Patrick, so it surprised me how softly spoken he was. But his intelligence for the game is, you can't play to the level he was if you weren't really intelligent as a footballer. But also how he sees the game, but his manner and how he can get his point across to you, how he can make you understand. Actually, there was some points he's making, I'm thinking, he's spot on. He's astute. He's very intelligent about football. He's got a very nice manner about him. But also, you know, he's got that. If you cross him, you'll be on the wrong side of him. And that's something
quite
you don't.
present.
That's
you know, he's one of them
that was exactly it. That's what.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of them sort of guys that, you know, when we had a meeting on Monday morning, he'd be very vocal in that dressing room. You know, what went wrong the weekend? Why did you do that? And you know, he knew exactly how the game should be played. We see all the battles we had with Manchester United, and you know he was up for the fight every single time. So he is a gamble. Don't get me wrong. He's a huge gamble if you took Patrick as a manager, and I'm sure the board will be looking at every single scenario. You know, whether they're going to go with experience. I know Simeone's more or less talked himself out of it at Atletico. Then you look at people like Allegri, Joachim Löw's been mentioned. There's lots of candidates out there.
It's a shame Simeone has, because he is what that football club needs. For what I look at Arsenal,
he's the total opposite, isn't he?
He wants his teams to play. If you watch it, of course, against Barcelona and Real Madrid, he knows that a lot better. So he'd then play a little bit more defensive and then play counter-attacking football. But against the lesser teams, they have way more possession. The other team, they have a lot of good players, and he lets them express themselves against those type of teams. But with this Arsenal team at this moment, without the ball, I say at the moment, for the last 5-6 years, without the ball, they're poor.
Do you think they're going to have to change the personnel as well? I was going to say, can you change them players into more defensive-minded?
Yeah,
do you look at the squad you've got? If you're the Arsenal board, Craig, do you look at the squad you've got, and the word seems to be that there's not going to be a huge amount of money to overhaul that squad, unless there are sales. Do you look at a manager to suit the squad?
Look, I believe there's players in that squad who can improve, who need to get better, who should be better. They've stagnated, they haven't improved. A lot of their players over the years, they've bought young, expecting them to improve, but to me they haven't. They haven't got better. And I actually look at them defensively, they haven't got... in transition, if they lose the ball in the final third, and they then have to defend, you can run past them, you can run off them, they don't see danger. And if a manager can come in and get their intensity up without the ball, get them closer to people, get them more organised, and with the ability they have then on the ball, then they can become a very, very good team.
Will we see what level Arsenal are at tomorrow night, Ray, against Atletico?
Well, this is a big test for them.
Massive
really
test.
big test. You know, this should show that if they're capable of getting to that final, because over 2 legs, it's very important they get some sort of lead in this opening game, because you go to Atletico, they've not conceded since January at home. They're unbelievable at home. So it's going to be very difficult. But whether the decision to come out and say, you know, I'm going to leave at the end of the season, the board fault him, they might give everybody a lift, or the players might respond to Arsene Wenger. It'd be interesting to see why they did come out with that decision, because Arsene Wenger said, well, it wasn't my decision.
To announce it.
Exactly. So I'd like to see what sort of reaction they get.
Well, I've got to say, Ray, I was at the stadium on Sunday, and if anyone was expecting for roses and the start of the farewell tour, there was a lot of empty seats, a lot of apathy, a few half-hearted, only one Arsene Wenger chance, and it was, you know, fairly
well, the fans,
lukewarm at best.
The fans have got to play their part as well on Thursday. You know, tomorrow. It's so important they get behind the team from the opening whistle, because this is a huge game for Arsenal Football Club, not just the future. I mean, Champions League football at the end of it, it could decide what manager comes in. You know, in that summer.
But also, as well, when the players come out and say, you know, we really want to do it for Arsene Wenger, can a team that's underperformed turn it on all of a sudden over the next 4 or 5 games?
Difficult, but there's a lot. Listen, over the last, you know, 2-3 years, there's been a lot of talk from Arsenal players. A lot of talk from every time they get a good result, we've turned the corner. Team spirits is the best it's ever been. They're quite good at saying that. They have to show it. They have to show it tomorrow, because there's going to be a big test.
You're sceptical, aren't you?
I'm only because it's Atletico Madrid. Simeone's incredible. His team play, they resemble exactly what he was as a player. They would, for me, be your worst nightmare. They're your worst nightmare for a team like Arsenal to play against. I hope I'm wrong, but they're going to have to perform to a level, especially without the ball, that I'm not sure Arsenal are capable of doing.
The problem you have is, well, if they did step it up for Arsene Wenger, where have they been all season?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the argument you have. So, well, wait a minute, you know, because I'm leaving now, why didn't you play like this?
We did it for the old manager, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more disappointed if they started...
Be more angry, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.